The hearing room was designed to intimidate. High ceilings, cold marble. 23 members of Congress seated in elevated chairs, looking down at a single witness table. At 9 a.m. sharp, Kash Patel entered room 2141 of the Rayburn House office building, carrying nothing but a leather portfolio and the kind of calm that makes opponents nervous. What followed would become legendary in Washington circles, not for what was revealed, but for what wasn't. 8 hours of relentless questioning, 0 mistakes, 0 emotional breaks, 0 sound bites that could be weaponized. By the time the gavel fell at 5:47 p.m., both Democrats and Republicans had learned the same lesson. Kash Patel doesn't break. But the real story wasn't about survival. It was about strategy, psychology, and the art of turning interrogation into performance. Act 1. The orchestrated ambush. 3 months of preparation led to this moment. The House Judiciary Committee had sharpened their questions like knives. Chairman Jim Jordan wanted validation that the FBI was finally being reformed. The Democratic minority wanted proof that Trump had turned the Bureau into his personal enforcement agency. Both sides came armed with subpoenaed documents, leaked memos, and enough political ammunition to destroy a lesser man. Representative Jamie Raskin fired the first shot at 9:14 a.m. Director Patel, you've publicly criticized the FBI's past leadership, called for investigations into your predecessors, and promised to drain the swamp inside the Bureau. Do you believe the FBI should operate independently from political influence? The question was a masterpiece of entrapment. Answer yes, and he'd contradict his own reform agenda. Answer no, and he'd confirm every fear about politicized law enforcement. The room leaned forward. Cameras zoomed. This was the moment that would define the day. Patel's response was surgical. Congressman, independence and accountability aren't opposites. The FBI operates under the rule of law, not the rule of politics. When I criticize past failures, I'm not questioning independence. I'm demanding it. True independence means following evidence wherever it leads, regardless of who's uncomfortable with the destination. Raskin tried to interrupt. Patel continued. If you're asking whether I take orders from the White House on specific investigations, the answer is no. If you're asking whether I believe the FBI needed structural reform after years of documented failures, the answer is yes. Both things can be true, Congressman. The answer went viral within minutes. Conservative media praised it as brilliant deflection. Liberal commentators called it carefully crafted evasion. But legal scholars noted something more interesting. Patel had just established the framework for every answer that would follow. He wasn't playing defense. He was redefining the terms of engagement. The Epstein trap. When silence speaks louder. 2 hours into testimony, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez shifted tactics. She had been waiting for this moment, and everyone knew it. Director Patel, let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Under your leadership, 174 pages of documents remain classified. These documents allegedly contain names of powerful people, politicians, businessmen, foreign dignitaries. The American people deserve transparency. What are you hiding? The question detonated across social media instantly. Epstein files began trending within 60 seconds. News alerts pinged on phones across the gallery. This wasn't just a question, it was a cultural flashpoint, designed to force Patel into an impossible choice: release politically explosive documents or appear complicit in a cover-up. Patel didn't flinch. Representative, I'm not hiding anything. I'm protecting ongoing investigations, victim privacy, and intelligence equities that span multiple federal agencies. Classification isn't a political decision, it's a legal and operational one. AOC leaned in. So you're saying the public doesn't have a right to know? I'm saying the public has a right to justice, which requires protecting investigative integrity. If you believe I'm improperly withholding documents, there are congressional mechanisms to challenge that. I've offered this committee classified briefings on the specific equities involved. The question isn't whether I'm transparent, it's whether you want information or theater. The exchange became the most replayed clip of the day, but what cameras didn't catch was more revealing than what they did. 3 rows back, a former DOJ prosecutor whispered to a colleague, "He just told her she's grandstanding without saying the word." The colleague nodded. "And she can't call him on it without proving his point." More importantly, Patel had done something almost no witness does successfully. He'd turned an accusation into an offer. By inviting classified review, he'd shifted burden back to his questioners. Decline the briefing and they look unserious. Accept it, and they can't publicly discuss what they learn. Either way, Patel controlled the narrative. But there was a deeper game being played. 4 people in that room knew something the transcript wouldn't show. 17 of those classified pages contained information about foreign intelligence operations still active in 2025. Releasing them wouldn't just embarrass powerful people, it would compromise national security operations across 3 continents. Patel couldn't say this publicly without revealing why. So he took the political hit and protected the operational reality. That's what separating politics from duty looks like when cameras are watching. The loyalty test, walking between landmines. Hour 4 brought the question everyone anticipated. Representative Dan Goldman, former federal prosecutor and Trump impeachment counsel, delivered it with the precision of a sniper. "Director Patel, you were handpicked by President Trump after publicly supporting his claims about the 2020 election, the deep state, and FBI corruption. You've been called the most political FBI director in history. Simple question. Are you loyal to the president or to the Constitution?" The temperature dropped. This wasn't about FBI operations anymore. This was existential. A referendum on whether law enforcement could exist independent of political power in modern America. Every news outlet would lead with this exchange. Every political analyst would dissect it. And Patel knew that any answer other than the Constitution would end his credibility. But saying only that would alienate the president who appointed him. Patel took 3 seconds before responding. In congressional testimony, 3 seconds feels like an eternity. When he spoke, his voice carried a different weight. "Congressman, I've sworn an oath to the Constitution 4 times in my career. Twice as a prosecutor, once as a congressional staffer, once as FBI director. I've never sworn an oath to any president, any party, or any political ideology." He paused, then continued. "You asked if I'm the most political FBI director in history. I'd argue every FBI director operates in a political environment. The question is whether they're driven by politics. I prosecuted cases under Obama. I investigated threats under Trump. I'll enforce federal law under any administration. If that makes me political, then so is every law enforcement officer who takes the job seriously." Goldman pressed harder. "But you haven't answered." "I've answered exactly what you asked. You want me to denounce the president who appointed me to prove independence. That's politics disguised as accountability. I don't denounce people. I follow evidence. If the president violates federal law, he'll be investigated like anyone else. If he doesn't, he won't. That's not loyalty. That's the rule of law." The response became instant commentary fodder. Republicans called it a perfect answer. Democrats accused Patel of hiding behind procedure. But former FBI officials noted something different. One retired agent told a reporter, "He basically said he'd investigate Trump if needed. Nobody caught it because he didn't use the words they wanted to hear." The truth was more complex. Patel had walked a nearly impossible line, defending institutional independence without attacking political leadership. He'd affirmed constitutional duty without virtue signaling, and he'd done it in a way that gave both sides just enough to avoid total war while denying both sides the scalp they wanted. The 15 minutes that changed everything. At 2:17 p.m., Chairman Jordan called recess. Patel stood, adjusted his tie, and walked toward the corridor. What happened next exists only in whispers and second-hand accounts. but its impact was undeniable. 3 Democratic members, Representatives Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, and Ted Lieu, intercepted Patel near the elevator bank. No staffers, no cameras, no official record, just 4 lawyers who understood that real negotiation happens away from microphones. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, all 4 returned to the hearing room with expressions that hadn't existed before. Patel's face remained unchanged, the same professional neutrality that had defined his testimony. The 3 Democrats looked thoughtful in a way that suggested recalibration rather than capitulation. What was said? No transcript exists. No staffer took notes. But in the 3 hours of testimony that followed, something shifted. Democratic questions became more focused on policy specifics and less on political attacks. When Representative Schiff asked about January 6th investigations, Patel's answer was surprisingly detailed, confirming that dozens of cases remained active, that FBI wasn't politically screening defendants, and that both far-right and far-left extremist groups faced equal scrutiny. A committee aide later told a journalist, off the record, "Whatever Patel said in that hallway, it wasn't a threat and it wasn't a deal. It was information, something that made them realize they'd been operating on incomplete intelligence about what FBI was actually doing." Another source, closer to Schiff, offered a different interpretation. Patel showed them evidence that some of their assumptions were wrong. Not about everything, but about enough that continuing certain lines of attack would make them look uninformed when facts eventually came out. A third theory emerged months later from a former DOJ official. He told them about an ongoing investigation that would vindicate FBI's nonpartisan approach. Something big enough that going scorched earth now would backfire politically when it broke. The truth likely combined all 3. Patel had done what great lawyers do. He'd given his opponents enough information to change their cost-benefit analysis without revealing enough to lose strategic advantage. He'd created doubt where certainty had existed, and he'd done it in 11 minutes, off camera, with no witnesses who would talk. That's power that doesn't require performance. The document allegation: chaos as strategy. Hour 6 exploded without warning. Representative Matt Gaetz, typically one of Patel's staunchest defenders, asked a question that seemed to come from a parallel universe. "Director, can you confirm whether the FBI is currently investigating allegations of classified document mishandling by former officials from both political parties?" Standard question. Then Gaetz added, "Including individuals who may be in this room?" The hearing detonated. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Democrats demanded clarification. Republicans looked confused. Chairman Jordan banged the gavel repeatedly, and Kash Patel sat completely still, face revealing nothing, as chaos bloomed around him. When silence finally returned, Patel's response was careful to the point of surgical. "Congressman, FBI doesn't confirm or deny specific investigations through public testimony. If any member of Congress were under investigation, they would be contacted directly through appropriate legal channels. To my knowledge, no one in this room has received such contact." He paused, then added the knife. "But if you have specific concerns about your own status, Congressman Gaetz, my office is available to brief you privately." The implication landed like a nuclear weapon. Gaetz had either A. received information suggesting committee members were under investigation, B. was bluffing to create chaos, or C. was himself concerned about his own exposure. Patel's answer confirmed nothing but suggested everything. For 20 minutes, the hearing descended into procedural warfare. Members demanded Patel clarify. Jordan tried to restore order. Minority Leader Jerry Nadler accused Gaetz of reckless conspiracy mongering. And through it all, Patel sat silently, occasionally sipping water, watching the institution devour itself. Later, investigative reporters would discover that Gaetz had received information from a source about sealed indictments involving document mishandling. The indictments existed, but they involved mid-level officials from previous administrations. Nobody in Congress, nobody currently in government, nobody who mattered politically. Gates had taken partial intelligence and weaponized it for unknown purposes. Patel had refused to take the bait. Instead, he'd let Gates's chaos work against itself. By offering private briefing, he'd called the bluff. By confirming notification procedures, he'd established that no sitting member faced investigation. And by remaining completely calm while everyone else panicked, he'd demonstrated exactly the institutional stability his critics claimed he lacked. Sometimes the best answer is letting others self-destruct. The endurance test, when stamina becomes legitimacy. By 5 p.m., most committee members had rotated out. Staff members looked exhausted. Reporters scrolled phones waiting for something newsworthy. Only the most committed remained, and Kash Patel, who had now been answering questions for 8 hours straight, with 2 bathroom breaks and 0 food. Representative Pramila Jayapal, one of the final questioners, seemed genuinely concerned. "Director Patel, you've been here all day. We've asked hundreds of questions. Are you okay?" Patel smiled, the first unguarded expression all day. "Congresswoman, I once spent 14 hours in a skiff reviewing terrorist interrogation transcripts. This is just conversation with better lighting." The room laughed, actual genuine laughter from both sides of the aisle. It was a moment of humanity in a day of combat, and it reminded everyone watching that behind the political theater was an actual person. Someone who'd spent years in courtrooms, classified briefings, and high-pressure negotiations where 8-hour marathons were just Tuesday. But the comment also did something more subtle. It reminded the committee that Patel wasn't a political appointee playing prosecutor. He was a career national security lawyer who happened to be politically appointed. The distinction mattered because it reframed the entire day. This wasn't a politician surviving congressional oversight. This was a professional doing his job while Congress did theirs. Representative Jim Jordan delivered the final question at 5:43 p.m. "Director Patel, after everything today, the accusations, the insinuations, the political theater, do you believe this committee has been fair to you?" Patel considered the question with genuine care. "Mr. Chairman, I didn't come here expecting fairness. I came here expecting accountability. This committee has a constitutional duty to oversee the FBI. I have a duty to answer your questions within the bounds of law, security, and operational integrity. Whether that's fair depends on what standard we're applying. But I believe we've both fulfilled our obligations today. Whether anyone's satisfied with that is above my pay grade." At 5:47 p.m., Jordan gavelled the hearing closed. The aftermath. What success looks like. As the room emptied, Patel remained seated, reviewing notes with a junior FBI staffer. A reporter later asked the staffer what Patel said in that moment. The answer: "Just Tuesday." The comment would become legendary within the Bureau, not because it minimized what happened, but because it contextualized it. For political operatives, the hearing was historic drama. For Patel, it was operational reality. Another day navigating impossible politics while trying to run a federal agency. But 3 outcomes emerged that mattered more than any single exchange. First, Patel had proven he couldn't be easily categorized. He defended institutional independence while acknowledging need for reform. He protected Trump's political space while refusing to become Trump's weapon. He gave Democrats enough respect to maintain credibility while giving Republicans enough confidence to sustain support. In a polarized environment demanding tribal loyalty, he'd remained institutionally focused. Second, the hearing exposed limits of congressional oversight when facing someone who understands the game better than the players. Patel had been a congressional staffer before joining DOJ. He knew how hearings were structured, how questions were designed, how traps were set. and he'd systematically neutralized every trap without appearing defensive. Third, and most importantly, the American public had watched an FBI director spend 8 hours under hostile questioning without losing composure, contradicting himself, or providing any soundbite that could destroy him. In an age where 15-second clips can end careers, Patel had given opponents 8 hours of footage and 0 usable ammunition. Love him or hate him, Kash Patel had demonstrated something rare in modern Washington: the ability to exist in political space without being consumed by it. The question that haunts. But there was one question nobody asked. One question that, if answered honestly, might have reframed everything. Director Patel, do you believe American institutions can survive this level of politicization? Because that was the real story hiding behind every exchange, not whether Patel was Trump's loyalist or independent operator. Not whether FBI investigations were legitimate or politically motivated. Not whether Epstein files should be released or remain classified. The real story was whether federal law enforcement could maintain legitimacy when half the country suspects it of partisan bias regardless of evidence. Whether congressional oversight can function when every hearing becomes political theater. Whether institutions built on public trust can survive when trust itself has become partisan. Patel never answered that question because it was never asked. But as he walked out of Rayburn Building that evening, past protesters and cameras and reporters shouting questions, one observer noticed something. He was smiling. Not a political smile, not a media-trained smile. A genuine smile of someone who'd just endured something difficult and knew tomorrow would bring more, and was completely okay with that. Because Kash Patel understood what critics and supporters both missed. The hearing wasn't the test. The hearing was performance. The real test was what happened next, in decisions made without cameras, investigations conducted without headlines, in the quiet work of maintaining institutional integrity when institutions themselves are under siege. That test has no 8-hour time limit. It's every day, forever. And the man who never broke knows that survival isn't measured in hearings. It's measured in whether the institution still functions when the political storm passes, or if it passes at all.